Well, there I am. Adam, the guy in his 30s talking about video games on YouTube. Who would have thought that? But how did we get here, I hear you say? And why am I claiming that a game with a drunken squirrel, a foul-mouthed scarecrow, and a giant singing pile of, well, you know, one of the genre's best? I also hear you say. Well, it's a long story. Come closer, and I'll tell you. It all started back on the Nintendo 64. And what a console that was. With a game called Conker's Bad Fur Day. "2001 was an interesting year for video games. The Nintendo 64 was on its way out, the PlayStation 2 was already dominating the market, the GameCube was just around the corner, and Microsoft was about to revolutionize the industry by dropping one of the chunkiest controllers of all time. We as gamers were standing on the threshold of technology. One foot in the experimental 3D era of the late 90s, and the other stepping into something flashier and more refined. Enter the Nintendo 64.
But millions of kids already know what they want for Christmas, a new video game system called Nintendo 64.
Nintendo's new game machine is 64 bits, making it the most powerful machine on the market.
The N64 had a lot of first-party hits like The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart 64, Super Smash Bros., but there was also a third-party company called Rare that had been working with Nintendo for many years, and had been responsible for some of the most cutting-edge games released at that time. On the Super Nintendo, which was Nintendo's previous console, Rare redefined what was possible with Donkey Kong Country, a game that pushed the hardware so far that executives thought the game was running on an unreleased console with new hardware. That game alone, with its fantastic animation, graphics, and soundtracks, turned the SNES into one of the most must-have consoles of the time. In the N64 era, Rare practically carried Nintendo's third-party lineup on their backs. GoldenEye was the genre-defining first-person shooter of a generation of gamers. Banjo-Kazooie gave us that fun and charm that Mario 64 was lacking, in my opinion. And Diddy Kong Racing showed that even Rare could out-Mario Mario Kart. Rare was making hit after hit after hit and setting standards for what games should be. But those standards came with a caveat. Nintendo, for all their innovation, was also famously cautious when it came to the types of games that they were releasing on their platform. With certain exceptions, they wanted family-friendly mascots, safe worlds, bright colors, games that sold consoles without ever really rocking the boat. That meant Rare had to balance their creative edge with Nintendo's no-risk philosophy. Banjo-Kazooie was the perfect example of playing it safe and not pushing things too far. And then, towards the tail end of the console's life cycle, comes Conker's Bad Fur Day. Believe it or not, Conker's Bad Fur Day didn't start out as the crude, chaotic masterpiece we know today. It originally began as 12 Tales Conker 64, a middle-of-the-road traditional platformer. Bright, safe, family-friendly, exactly the kind of platforming adventure game that you'd expect to see on a Nintendo console. The problem was Rare had already nailed the formula with Banjo-Kazooie. And once Banjo hit shelves, Conker suddenly looked redundant. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't exciting either. Nobody at Rare wanted to spend years building a game that already felt outdated. And that's when Chris Seaver, an art designer for the game, came up with an idea on what direction to take the Conker project.
What can we do with that? Oh, I know. We'll make it violent.
They leaned heavily into its M-rated themes. It was a huge risk, but it gave Conker something it desperately needed, an identity. The pilot for this version of Conker was the Beehive mission, one of the earliest moments of the game. The stolen beehive started out as a simple idea from Tim Stamper, one of Rare's co-founders, but Chris and his team transformed it into something more than a standard fetch quest.
Eat that, motherfucker.
What could have been a throwaway mission became a showcase of Conker's Bad Fur Day's twisted humor and over-the-top violence, and more importantly, Conker's own personality. The Beehive quest didn't just prove the game could lean into violence, it set the tone for how narrative, comedy, and character would all collide in Rare's most infamous experiment. And once Rare committed to this new vision, the game became a playground for parody. Every chapter seemed to riff off of something on the big screen. Saving Private Ryan, The Matrix, Alien, Terminator, Jaws, and so many other iconic movies made their way in. Sometimes these were just fun nods to a film, but for the most part they were fully integrated into different moments of the game. Conker wasn't just a platformer anymore. It was a satire of late 90s pop culture, a time capsule of our collective identity. That's part of why it resonates so strongly today. For anyone who grew up in that era, firing up Conker's Bad Fur Day isn't just revisiting a game, it's flipping through a scrapbook of cultural nostalgia. And it does a lot more than just play into that nostalgia. It helps keep the game fresh and exciting, each segment of the game introducing a new mechanic that are mini-games to learn and master. The chapters all have their unique style and gameplay mechanics associated to each one, and it adds just enough of a new challenge to help keep the player constantly engaged with what's happening. Platformers can get repetitive. You jump, collect, repeat, but in Conker's Bad Fur Day, every chapter feels like its own game, and yet somehow Rare stitched it all together without making it feel disjointed. That's what makes the pacing work. You never linger too long in one play style. It keeps you hooked and it keeps you guessing, and more importantly, it keeps you entertained. I want to focus specifically on the It's War chapter for a moment. Up until this point, Conker's Bad Fur Day felt like a mix of cartoon violence and playful parody. Conker himself is adorable but brash. He stumbles from one ridiculous situation to the next. The early chapters, while mature in tone, they still carry a lightheartedness, a sense that this is all just juvenile mischief taken to the extreme. But then comes It's War. Suddenly, the game shifts gears. The humor is still there, but it's wrapped in a layer of genuine urgency. You're no longer just solving puzzles or fending off cartoon enemies. You're storming beaches under heavy gunfire, watching allies get torn apart in front of you. For a game that had spent hours building itself up as a parodied romp through a fictional cartoon world, It's War lands with a weight that lingers. Beneath all the jokes and the gore, there are moments that feel poignant and real.
Oh, you're awake. Come over here, boy. Come on, look at this.
Yeah. Was a terrible thing, you know.
You're right there. All these fine young men sent off to do the dying. Those bigwigs, those pen pushers, those guys who never ever see a single bullet whiz past their heads. We want to get them down here. Those so-called generals in their big fancy houses, 20 miles behind enemy lines. Who are they to tell us? Who are they indeed? Look at that. What a sight.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
The horror. The horror.
When Conker's Bad Fur Day dropped in 2001, it was also fully voice acted, something that almost no other platformer of that era could claim. And it wasn't just functional voice acting either, it was character. Conker's sarcasm, the Queen Bee's over-the-top distress, Greg the Grim Reaper's complaints, every voice had its own flavor. It gave the game a personality that text simply couldn't deliver. And honestly, that's a huge reason it still feels fresh to this day.
What the damn diddly squat are you doing in my barn?
Well, I never. It's a talking pitchfork.
Not from round here, are you, boy?
No, I'm from the 21st century.
I don't rightly recollect liking your type. Therefore, I conclude that I was gonna kick your butt all around this barn like there's no tomorrow. I's gonna stick my big foot right in yous.
Were your parents related? Like before they were married?
Right, that's it. I's is gonna give you a whooping.
I did a recent playthrough of the game for this video, and it didn't feel like I was playing a old game. You get comedy sketches, parodies, and characters that still hit because they sound alive. There's a narrative to follow, one that isn't as predictable as one would think. Here's where things get interesting. You don't expect a crude comedy about a drunk squirrel to hit you with an ending that's actually sad, but Rare pulled it off. Conker stumbles through this absurd journey only to lose the one thing he really cares about in the end. The throne means nothing. The jokes fade, and we're left with a surprisingly heavy dose of melancholy. The ending reframes the whole game. It's not just about cartoon violence and movie parodies. It's about how fleeting the good things in life can be. It's a tonal gut punch that nobody saw coming, and that's what makes it so effective. One of the things that really sets the game apart is the level of detail the devs built into the game. It came from a place of respect and appreciation, not just for the work that they were doing, but to the players they were making the game for. Take the wall animations, for instance. Instead of running full tilt into an immovable object, Conker reacts. He literally pushes his hands up against the obstacle, showing he's hit something solid. After swimming in a liquid, Conker drips for the first few seconds once he's back on dry land. One little detail I particularly love is Conker's array of idle animations. They're more than just fun little Easter eggs, they're glimpses of his personality. Every time you leave him standing still, he's doing something expressive, something distinct. That level of care shows that Rare wasn't just animating a character, they were animating Conker. On a console known for its jagged polygons and simple textures, Conker stood out. I think that's how this game has managed to stay so front and center after all these years. You don't just remember the jokes, you remember how it felt to be Conker and to exist inside this bizarre world.
What is the world coming to? When a squirrel can't even go to a dinosaur-themed world without getting mugged by a bunch of prehistoric brats. Hey, give me my money back!
And of course, no other Conker's Bad Fur Day retrospective would be complete without touching on the multiplayer. And oh boy, what a multiplayer mode that was. Conker's Bad Fur Day has a total of 8 multiplayer modes. There's Total War, Colors, Beach, Raptor, Heist, Race, Tank, and Deathmatch. Total War dropped players straight into the trenches, with squirrels and teddies locked in a parody of a grim World War conflict. Machine guns, rocket launchers, grenades, katanas, and more turned the battlefield into a blood-soaked mess, complete with Rare's over-the-top gore. It was a simple team deathmatch with more of an emphasis on attacking the enemy base and defending your own. Each base had a canister of toxic gas that, when released, would act as a board wipe and kill anyone who wasn't in one of the safe zones. Colors is a team-based capture the flag mode where players battle to collect flags from the enemy base and return it to their own. In some ways, it felt similar to Total War, but what made it stand out was the sense of strength you had defending your own base, while feeling incredibly powerless while behind enemy lines. Set in a prehistoric arena, Raptor had 2 sides: cavemen tasked with stealing dinosaur eggs and returning them to their base, and hungry raptors whose only goal was to feast on cavemen. It was a brilliant mix of comedy and tension. Cavemen scrambled desperately for eggs while the raptors gleefully tore them apart. The imbalance was intentional, and it made every round feel unpredictable and hilarious. In Heist, you play as a weasel straight out of a 1920s mob movie, trying to swipe a bag of cash and haul it back to your base. Mechanically, it's a solo capture the flag free-for-all. So you can imagine things got pretty intense when you had 4 friends all playing together. Race was basically the lava surfing mode in the single-player game, but with up to 4 friends. I definitely played this one the least, only because if we had a group of friends together, we had better racing games to play. Played in a small arena with miniature tanks, this mode was short, sharp, and explosive. Players had to balance careful aiming with the sheer chaos of rockets bouncing around tight corners. It was simple and fun, but not a mode I would play often. The ultimate free-for-all, deathmatch stripped away objectives and left players to annihilate each other with the game's full arsenal of weapons, from machine guns to grenades to flamethrowers and rocket launchers. And finally, perhaps the most iconic mode, Beach, which flipped the formula of what most split-screen multiplayer games were. One team played as defenseless refugees trying to sneak their way across an open beach, while the other team, the Teddies, blasted them with various weapons from a fortified position. The gameplay loop was actually fairly repetitive. As the Teddies, you could only choose between the turret, the sniper rifle, and the rocket launcher, and your area of movement was severely limited. The refugees felt like one of those American Gladiator challenges where you had to make it to the end without getting hit. But there was only so many routes you could take. Despite its limitations, this mode was the one my friends and I sunk the most amount of hours in, just because of how different it was. To me, Conker's Bad Fur Day has always stood out as one of the more polished and tightly crafted single-player experiences of that era, with a phenomenal multiplayer mode that was much more than an afterthought. It truly was an extension of the same creativity, humor, and willingness to take risks that defined the main campaign. In a way, that multiplayer mode feels like a playground where all of Rare's strangest ideas were let loose, and the result is the game that delivered twice the value. It was a memorable story and a couch co-op experience people are still talking about decades later. Well, here I am, looking back at Conker's Bad Fur Day. Who would have thought I'd still be talking about it after all these years? Not me. I can tell you it's still a great platformer, one of the best of its times. But sometimes I wonder, do I think that because it really holds up? Or because nostalgia's pulling at the strings? Sure, we've had some incredible platformers since then. Games where everything feels so perfect. But maybe I don't want perfect. What I really want is that feeling of discovery again. When the only way to find a secret was in a strategy guide or from another kid on the playground, where I could just lose myself in a new world without all the weight of being an adult hanging over me. But that'll never happen. I guess it's true what they say. The grass is always greener, and you never really know what you had until it's gone. Gone. Gone.